All right. Yes, skedete. Sorry about that. Okay, Yasa, sorry about that. For all of you who are watching the live stream, my live stream video went down, so I do apologize for that. But anyway, we'll sort of continue with the conclusion to should the Divine Liturgy be in Latin? Should the Divine Liturgy be in Latin? Now, it's not as silly a question as you might think. Old Church Slavonic was used for the old traditional Mass in certain parts of Europe, of Eastern Europe. So, the idea of using a different language for the Divine Liturgy that's an ancient language, that's, maybe not something that's completely ridiculous. Perhaps having the Divine Liturgy in Latin would attract more traditionalists, maybe, who knows. However, if the process of translating the Divine Liturgy into Latin would be a very ad hoc process, it would really make no sense culturally speaking. No one is really asking for the Divine Liturgy to be in Latin. So it's not really, I think, a language that is appropriate for the Divine Liturgy at this point. Instead, if we want an ancient language, we've got Kini Greek, we've got Church Slavonic, etc. It is fun to sort of think about how liturgy and language intersect and to sort of challenge those assumptions that we have about language, right? To challenge those assumptions that we have about liturgical language, because it simply is not true that the Orthodox Church used the vernacular while the Catholic Church used Latin. That's just historically not the case, and it's not true today, of course. So at this point, I'd be open to anyone's questions if you want to talk about anything in particular. I'll keep the live stream open for a few more minutes. I see that I have one viewer, so anyone? I think maybe the break had us lose some of those questions. Before we left, a few people were saying like a poetic or a literary language sort of elevates worship, and I tend to agree with that. I really like the jurisdictions that choose to use elevated English in their worship, and I think that is an interesting choice as far as still having comprehensible and elevated language. I do think it's an interesting situation that in a few years, perhaps young people will understand about as much literary English or Shakespearean English as modern Greek does ancient Greek. What situation will we be in then? What is the new literary language, in other words? And it's also an interesting point that, although we use Kini Greek and it's a beautiful language, in the Greek Orthodox Church, and although we use other languages, it is also the case that those languages aren't, how do we put it? They're not sort of stuck in the past. They continue to develop modern vocabulary. So, how much of an ancient language are they really? Interesting question to ask. Well, again, that was just the conclusion. I apologize to all of you who got kicked off the stream. I'll say at this point, Kalispera. Oh, I've got a comment here. I find that reading and listening to the tropars and conducts in Vespers and Latin, it really educates me as to the feast. Yeah. In Vespers, yeah, it really educates me as to the feast. I agree. One of the wonderful things about the Orthodox liturgy is how literary it is and how wonderfully rich the texts themselves are. All right. Well, at this point, I'll say Kalispera. I apologize to all of you who were kicked off the stream, and I hope you all have a very good night. Adiosas.